the feds to more than $1 billion in suspicious activity and transfers by Epstein. The kind of money transfers that could show the kind of basically financial building blocks of a human trafficking regime. Only one problem. They waited and waited and waited. That powerhouse bank, which by the way has ties to Democrats and Republicans, only flagged what they called the suspicious $1 billion of transfers after Epstein died. This was over 4,000 transactions and related to all kinds of different individuals. Some might ultimately be completely legitimate or not crimes, but others clearly raised the question of money laundering and human trafficking. In a related report today, Bloomberg reveals that in 2007, federal prosecutors had a case on Epstein. This is one that wasn't charged, and it doesn't mean he was guilty of it. But when people used to ask, why didn't they go after more stuff with this guy? Well, some people did. Indeed, there was a lying prosecutor working doggedly to build a money laundering case against Epstein. This was previously undisclosed, and it looked at the large amounts of cash, which could be both dispersed to women around the world, which he was suspected to have victimized. The probe included grand jury subpoenas, target letters, went not only to the women who might have received money before and after certain incidents, but it would look at the transactions of all of these very wealthy people who paid Epstein sometimes suspiciously large sums of money for no clear service. So there was, this is what I mentioned to you, a 53-page draft indictment. This was not filed in court, to be clear, but it could have been because it got to the stage of drafting, and a prosecution memo that ran 80 pages. And it said in the memo that the Bush DOJ had the receipts and the goods, and they should go forward, indict him on money laundering, I should say, and operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. If you think about how the taxes fouled up Al Capone, this was a strong prosecutor saying, if we can't get him on the really bad stuff that isn't yet proven, let's get him on the money piece. That is following the money at the heart of the Epstein probe. And yet, for all of those written documents that could have made the case, that prosecutor was held back by more senior people in Bush DOJ. And there was, of course, infamously a sweetheart deal, which delayed any justice for Epstein's victims for a long time. Now, there's also rumors about blackmail. And we don't just throw that term around. Indeed, to be clear, there has not been a legally proven blackmail case against Epstein or an extortion case against others. This is one of those things that is an open question, although I can tell you that it looks like the DOJ never ran down the leads aggressively. And that raises questions of whether they were tied to too many important people or some other corruptive issue. But Trump's own Commerce Secretary talked about Epstein's blackmail.
That's what his MO was, you know, get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume, was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever. Blackmailed people. That's how he had money. I assume way back when, they traded those videos in exchange for him getting that 18-month sentence. I have no knowledge. But my assumption is there was a trade for the videos because there were people on those videos.
What you hear there is the voice of one Trump cabinet official completely contradicting another Trump cabinet official, because AG Bondi said there's no blackmail whatsoever, while their boss, Donald Trump, just wants everyone to stop talking about it. But thanks to the intrepid reporting there of Bloomberg and the New York Times, we have more evidence than we had yesterday, and frankly, more questions facing the Trump DOJ. We're joined by New York Times legal writer, Emily Bazelon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Both of these new accounts raise a lot of different questions, but first and foremost, they suggest that this level of alleged human trafficking couldn't really operate without some intermediaries. That yes, sometimes women and girls are abused on an individual basis and there can be money involved. But this level was something that involved banks, and banks that didn't do a very good job of what they're supposed to do. That's one thing that comes through. Your thoughts on it?
Right. Well, this story today is red flags that JP Morgan says that it was showing to prosecutors, reports that the bank was sending. And the red flag nature of this was that there were huge amounts of money changing hands going through the bank in these transactions, and that in itself can be a mark of human trafficking, because when it's done on a large scale, it can be associated with huge amounts of money like this. I think what you can see here is that JP Morgan, which has been criticized in past New York Times coverage, has not looked good for continuing to handle Epstein's finances for so long. Now JP Morgan is trying to say, hey, we did flag these transactions for the Justice Department, for the prosecutors. We were trying to help, and no one did anything with this information. Then that leads to the work of the career prosecutor you were talking about, who was trying to track the money laundering and start, really keep an investigation going. That is a time and labor intensive kind of investigation to run. It requires a lot of support from the higher ups. And so then the question is, well, what happened? It would be really interesting to talk to that prosecutor and find out what his or her side of the story is.
And what good is an alert from the bank if it comes after the target is dead?
Right. I mean, I think that is of limited utility. You could argue that the bank at that point is just trying to cover itself, and there isn't really very much value in what the bank is disclosing. At the same time, it's still important now because this investigation, the lack of a real serious punishment for Epstein. Yes, there were some consequences, but not the kind of criminal punishment we might expect. All of those questions continue to swirl. And because there have been a lot of questions raised about the money from both Democratic and Republican senators, among lots of other people, it remains of interest what happened here. And I think in particular, why these signals were not sent earlier, and why the whole kind of follow the money on the part of at least one prosecutor, why that didn't go further, why this indictment was not filed, as you started out by asking.
Yeah, because again, that's very far advanced in the process. A lot of evidence had gone into it. The grand jury process, et cetera, may have played out. And they say, I have a case. And then what you get is this sweetheart deal for Epstein. Democratic Senator Wyden has been on this for some time, and he's talked about the financial receipts. Take a look.
Now, somewhere in the Treasury Department, Mr. President, locked away in a cabinet drawer, is a big Epstein file that's full of actionable information. Follow the money details about his financing and operations that await investigation.
I think that's fair, and the more we learn about it, the more that it's clear that while the DOJ at times has reviewed itself, there was an Inspector General review of Epstein's death. The Bloomberg reporting mentions a review of the unusual circumstance of the sweetheart deal. So it's all in there, and yet, in essence, that's the DOJ kind of investigating itself, and it seems like there's a lot of smoke, and they haven't really pursued those other leads and avenues. So do you think, based on what we know, I mean, I'm asking you to speculate in a way, but based on what we know, that Wyden is onto something, that if there is a vote in the House to release these files, if that's enforced by a judge, even if Donald Trump doesn't want it, the rule of law holds, and these lawyers inside the government have to respond or be held in contempt to go to jail themselves. If we actually got all the files, you think there'd be important material there?
It certainly seems like there's a trail to follow here, and understanding why that indictment was not filed in this case about the finances seems like a really good path of inquiry, right? A way to focus the conversation now that we know about that indictment. Because look, there can be good reasons for prosecutors to decide not to file charges. They feel like they can't prove probable cause. They won't be able to present the facts confidently, persuasively to the grand jury. But it's not a very high standard, right? I mean, famously, grand juries indict almost everybody. We're not talking, the prosecutors are supposed to think they can prove the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. But at the grand jury stage, they don't have to do that. It's a one-sided part of the process in which they present information, and then there's an indictment. And with someone like Epstein, where there are all these questions of leverage, right? If you have someone indicted for more serious crimes and charges, that's a way that prosecutors jack up the pressure on a defendant to plead guilty and accept more of a sentence. Here we have the sweetheart deal. So then you wonder, well, was it this deal allowed to go into effect because this other part of the indictment wasn't filed, and so Epstein didn't have to worry about that part. It had already been taken care of for him. Those are the kinds of things that you want to know, or the questions you want to ask looking at these elusive, still undisclosed files.
Yeah, great points. It's Al Capone taxes. That's the theory of the case. And given what we now know, that there's evidence that Epstein was involved in these criminal enterprises, his co-conspirators in prison for it, it makes the money laundering case in retrospect look especially strong. Because either you believe that every dollar he ever got was legitimate, or you believe that some of it was for illegal activities. And the second door looks a lot more likely, just from what's public. Emily, thank you very much, and happy Halloween.
Thank you. Happy Halloween to you.
Appreciate it. We're going to fit in a break. We have something fun by the end of the hour.